Welcome. I know it's showing step 4 on the screen because this is where we left off last week. So we are continuing the buyer conversation. We talked about where to find buyers, the lead gen around buyer transactions. We talked about how to nurture those leads into a point where we're going to convert them into actual buyers. We talked about last week sitting down with them for the buyer consultation, how to approach the buyer representation agreement, what documents I might include with my buyer representation agreement that only have to get signed once by each buyer. It doesn't have to then get signed again at the next transaction. And then maybe even what documents we would send them home with. So now they've signed our BRBC. Remember, we need to have that BRBC signed in order to go show properties. It could also be a PSRA. I think it's PSRA. Which is the temporary one, which again is good for either 3 properties or 30 days, whichever happens first. It's not an and, it's an or. And now we've got this client and they're ready to go see properties. So we want to set them up for a property search. I highly recommend setting them up for a property search. I know I've talked with some agents that are like, oh, I don't set my buyers up for property searches. I just go in there and I get the alerts and then I make them aware of properties that come available when they're available. Why would we do that to ourselves? I don't understand. Why would we create more work? And it's not sustainable. You've got 5, 6, 7 buyers going at the same time. There's no way you can keep on top of the listings that are coming in and who matches what criteria. So please find a system, plug them in on their own property search where they're getting alerts every time a property hits the market. So I call that the ASAP. If you're using something like Barry's, you would set it up as an ASAP search, which means that every time something hits the market that matches that criteria, they're getting a notification that a alert is that a property matches. Now, through OneSuite, which we have access to free through Realty One Group, that system, although not truly my favorite CRM system, but that property search in there, if you set your buyers up on a property search in there, it has the ability to send them a text notification when a property matches their criteria. Now, keep in mind that the information for listings is only as good as it's put into the system. And the more we remove that from the MLS system itself, like Barry's, the less reliable the features are. So when we go into a system like OneSuite to set up a property search, we want to try to be broad. Like we want to try to, you can narrow it down by like city or area or county. You can do bedrooms and bathrooms. But when we start checking boxes like pool or no pool, then it becomes less accurate because it's disseminated information from the MLS, which is disseminated from the listing agent. So it just becomes a little less accurate. And sometimes on those third-party property searches like OneSuite, they have options available there that maybe don't correspond with the option in the MLS. So just play around with it a little bit. But I do like that one because it does have that text alert for our clients. So I think that's a cool feature. Now, if we're not setting our clients up for property searches, we think we're going to be like the end all. Here's the information as properties come available. Number one, now you've just spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week becoming a property search expert so that when those properties come available, you can make them aware. And number two, your buyers, they're going to go look for properties someplace. Okay, I promise you, they're going to go look for properties someplace. So if you're not sending them or setting them up with a website or a portal where they're able to do that, they're going to go places you don't want them to go where they might click on something and then have another agent contact them, and it's going to be a mess. Okay, so we don't want to leave ourselves open to that. So set them up on a property search, either in Barry's or like OneSuite. Those are the 2 free options that you have. Well, technically, Barry's isn't free, but you're paying for it anyway, so you might as well utilize it. I do like their property search. It also, you can open up the client portal so they can go in there and create other searches or search for properties that don't show up on their property search. And again, they're going to get alerts every time something matches their criteria. They're going to get a notification for that. So I think that's a win. So now they've said, hey, yeah, we found some properties we want to go see. We're going to go show properties. I highly recommend not to show more than 6 properties at a time. Okay. One reason for that is that because of your system, because we've already gone through the buyer's property preference form with them, we know what their desires are. We know what their must-haves are. We know why those things are important. they should find a property in those first 6 properties. Okay. Your system should be that good. And you can let them know that. Also, if we go out to show more than 6 properties, at the minimum, it's going to take 20 minutes per property, right? So 6 properties is 2 hours of seeing properties. Okay, if your buyers are more meticulous or more attention to detail, or they like to spend time in each property, we've stretched that into potentially 3 or 4 hours to see 6 properties. They're going to be burnt out and done. Okay, so we try to limit it to 6. Now, one way to do that is oftentimes like we're looking in a city and area and they're like, oh, I like this property, and this property. Well, I hate to break the news to them, but those are all the same floor plan. So let's pick the one that kind of matches where they want to be. Do they want more of a fixer upper or more than one that's ready to go? If they like that floor plan after we've seen one, we can let them know if there's a couple others in that they kind of earmarked or that are the same floor plan. And then we could go out maybe the next day and just look at that floor plan that turned out to be their favorite, right? So that's one way to eliminate is let's break off the ones that are the exact same floor plan. Because if we've set up 6 properties and 3 of them are the same floor plan, we walk into the first one, they're like, this doesn't work. Now our whole showing schedule has been blown apart because they don't even want to see those other 2 properties. It's the same floor plan. Okay. So six properties. And I would recommend in your trunk of your car that you create a showing survival basket or a small ice chest in there. Maybe has some waters in it, some snacks, some snacks that are like going to be more kid friendly as well as adult friendly snacks. So that as you're getting through, you've seen 3 or 4 properties, you can say, hey, would you like a water? I've got some in the car. Or do you need a snack? You could just bring the little snack basket in and set it down on the counter as they're seeing that 3rd property and be like, hey, if you guys need a snack to keep you going through the rest of the properties, feel free to grab something, right? And then we pick it up and carry it with us. I promise that's going to like be a lifesaver. All right, so you're going to go see those properties. If they don't find the perfect match, no problem. We're going to go back to the drawing board. But now we know what they like and what they don't like. Sometimes it's good just to go walk through a couple of properties because although they've filled out their BIPP form, you know what's important to them, you know what they want. Sometimes that changes a little bit as we go see properties because the realization of, well, what works for us and what doesn't changes as they see those properties. Something that they thought would work is now no longer going to work, and something they didn't even know they needed, now they really want. Okay. As we're showing appointments, make sure we set those expectations up front. We want to review the process with them, right? Of how we're going to go see properties, that you'll set up the search. You'll let them know what property to meet at what time, right? And then we're just going to continue to communicate with them through this process. Also know what kind of communication source they like best. Do they prefer phone calls? Do they prefer you text them? Do they want to receive emails from them? That way you can have that communication. And once they've found the property that they want to write an offer on, we also need to know, like, hey, are they comfortable with us sending that offer over to them electronically? Or do they want to sit down in our office with us and go through that offer, especially if they're first-time home buyers? That first one, they may want to go through in person to make sure they understand all of the terms and nuances inside of that offer. Okay. Any questions about showing properties? At some point, just so you guys know too, I do have the chat box open. I am watching your little microphones in case you unmute yourself to ask a question. You can always raise your little Zoom hand as well. If you're watching this on repeat, you can throw them in the comments section. We usually pay attention to those comments so we can answer questions. At some point in the future here, I will circle back and do some trainings on setting up showings in Berries. How to use that to map it and route it, and how to save them in carts so that it makes it easy to pull up when you're on the fly. So we'll go through the technical side of this at some point in the future. But any questions before we move forward? All right, we talked about setting up the automatic MLS searches, no more than 6 homes per appointment. You could always reach out to your database and post buyers' needs on social media. So those are a couple other ways to maybe identify potential sellers for properties that aren't yet on the market. It might be good, you know, once a week or once every 2 weeks, you send out a buyer needs email to your whole database. And of course, you're going to have them in a CRM system. So it'll be super easy to send out that email. It's not like you've got, you know, pieces of paper floating all over your office. So get them in a CRM. So that you can contact them and say, hey, here are my buyer's needs right now. Do you know of anybody? Have you thought of selling a house, or do you know of anybody thinking of sell a house that matches this criteria? Because they might have a neighbor or a friend or a coworker or somebody that was talking with them about potentially listing their house or thinking about selling. And you're like, oh my gosh, I think the coworker that I talked to, I think their house matches this criteria. They're going to reach out to that coworker and they're going to be like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then they're going to be like, hey, Anastasia, I think I've got a house for you. Here's the contact information for the seller. And now, guess what's going to happen? Even if this isn't a good match for your buyer, you're probably going to secure that listing. Okay, so super win-win. The other thing is post those buyers' needs on social media. Of course, we don't ever want to disclose the buyer's identity. We just want to put the search criteria out there. So once a week, you may want to post like a buyer's needs social media post of, here's the homes I'm looking for. Do you know of anybody looking to sell that's not currently on the market? Okay, great way to lead generate for potential sellers and become the hero for your buyers by finding something not on market. Dun, 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 dun. Showing techniques. When we go to show those properties, we want to make sure we call ahead to let them know that we're going to show. Even if it's a vacant home and it says go and show, I usually will send the agent a text message to let them know that I'm planning to show the property tomorrow at 3 o'clock. That way, they know that if they get an offer tonight, they've already got another showing scheduled, or they can let you know that, hey, we've already got 3 offers in hand, and you can be like, cool, I'm not going to show it then, right? So don't waste your time. So I always let them know. I try to follow the instructions in the MLS, and for the most part, when scheduling showings, I do it either via showing time or via text. Okay, so that way I'm not like bothering them verbally ahead of time. When you get to the property, also, I always keep like a little notes section with the property address and the agent's contact or mobile number. That way, if I'm running a little behind, I can easily text the agent, say, hey, we're running about 10 minutes behind. We're still coming. I just wanted to give you a heads up so they can let their clients know, even if I've scheduled it through showing time. Once you get there, even if the home is vacant, you want to make sure you ring that doorbell, knock on it, and announce yourself. So if it's supposed to be, well, even if it's supposed to be vacant, I usually, when I walk up to the door, I'll either knock on it or ring the doorbell. Give it a few minutes to make sure I don't hear anybody. I also came from, back in 2006 to 2008, where we had lots of people taking up residence in vacant homes that were being foreclosed on. So it gives you time to, let that person scurry out the back and over the fence. So it's a safety and security thing. So I always ring or knock first. Then once I open the door, you want to announce yourself. Hey, Amy here. I'm here to show the property, right? I've also walked in on people that didn't answer their door because they were doing things that I would rather not see. So I always announce myself. When I open the door initially, I do lead my buyers into the house. It's probably the only time I position myself without the exit between me and my buyers. I usually position myself so that I can get out of the house in case something went south, especially with buyers that I'm not comfortable with or don't know very well. But other than that, I open the door, lead them in just to make sure it's safe. Once I've determined that, yeah, the house is vacant, there's nobody here, the sellers have left the property, then I'm going to encourage them to explore the home. Open cupboards, feel free to open closets and cupboards. You're thinking about buying this house, so it's important you know what's inside those cupboards. No, we're not buying the stuff in there, but you want to know how big those closets are and how big the cupboards are. You want to take a back seat. You don't need to walk them through the property and be like, here's the kitchen and here's the living room. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Here's a bathroom. So unnecessary. I usually try to, get through the house first, maybe open even the back door for them so it makes it easy for them to exit into the back door. I might even like open a few closet doors just so they feel comfortable as they're walking through that property to peeking inside. I'm going to turn on some lights if the lights aren't on. And then I'm just going to watch and listen. What are they saying? What are they thinking? What are they saying they like, they don't like? Are they talking about how their couch would fit in the living room, right? Did they encourage their kids to go see what room they like? Like, how much do they like this house? You can usually tell a lot just by kind of being a fly on the wall during the showing. After we close or they're done looking at the house. Number one, I try not to get feedback inside the house anymore because Most houses have recording devices in them or ring cameras or whatever, and I don't want the seller hearing what the buyers think about the property. I want to have the upper hand on that. So I'm going to return the home as I found it. If lights were off, I'm going to turn them off. If lights were on, I'm going to leave them on. If there's a candle burning, this happens all the time. I walk into houses and there's candles burning. I don't feel comfortable walking out of the house with the candle burning, so I always usually blow the candle out, call it a day. Lock the door if it was locked, leave it unlocked, potentially if it was unlocked. If I do walk up to a property and the door is unlocked and I was expecting it to be locked, nobody told me it would be unlocked, then I'm usually going to message the listing agent and say, hey, when I got here, the door was unlocked. Do you want me to lock it back up or do you want me to leave it unlocked? Okay, because I never want to lock a seller out of a house, which happens all the time, because you'd be surprised how many sellers never actually lock their doors and they don't actually have keys to get in their house. Okay. So keep that in mind. If the garage door was unlocked, the door between the house and the garage door, I'm going to leave it unlocked. Okay. And then leave your business card and or a note behind, just so the seller knows you've been there. It's funny to me, listing at the listing agent, how many times the seller will contact me and be like, I don't think they came. I left the house for nothing. I'd be like, no, I got notified that the lockbox was accessed. They did come through the property. So if you leave something behind, a card or a simple note that says, hey, thanks for letting us see the property, then it does let the seller know that their toil of leaving the house was worthwhile. Once we're outside the house and usually away from the front door, like back out towards the cars, then you want to make sure that you get feedback about the property. How did you feel about this one? What did you like? What did you not like? Okay, because we want to be able to adjust their search and their criteria as we go through those properties. If they've seen a couple properties, right? We saw property number one and they kind of liked property number one. Now we're seeing property number two and they're like, oh, yeah, we like this one too. I like to say, hey, at that point, which one did you like more? Right? Which one was your favorite, or what house had features that you preferred? Right? So that we know which their top pick is on every house that we go to. And then the next one, if they're like, I think we actually like the first one a little bit better. Perfect. We go to house number 3. Now when we finish up, they're like, yeah, we like this one too. Perfect. Well, this one compared to the first house, which one had more features that you preferred? Right? And they'd be like, oh, I actually think this one. I think this is so far the top, right? So now we're keeping it and we're weeding out properties as we go through the process. Any questions there about those showing techniques? All right. Showing, don't feel like you need to accompany buyer in every room. We talked about that. Don't state the obvious. We talked about that. Don't disagree with your buyers. Okay. They are there to look at the property. You're representing them, their wants and desires. If they're like, man, this property is really ugly. Yeah, it actually is. But I think just with a fresh coat of paint, you could totally change the whole look, right? So it's okay to make suggestions to them, but we don't want to be like, oh, I don't think it's that ugly, right? So it's okay. I like to make jokes about the properties as I pass through, especially as I get more comfortable with my buyers. It makes it kind of more fun. We kind of, pick on the properties a little bit together. Don't feel like you got to defend the property, right? That's not your job. Don't skip a home without communicating to the listing agent. Okay, again, just let them know that, hey, my buyers, we ran out of time or we're running behind, or they decided they didn't want to look at that property anymore. Just want to let you know that we're not coming by. And then don't set up more showings until your buyer has eliminated the showings from the houses from this showing for consideration. Okay. Let's see here. As we go through each property, you want to ask if there were no more homes to see, which one would you choose? Why, right? Advantages, it's fewer homes to see. You're creating that forward motion and ease of decision making. You also know if criteria has changed. We've kind of talked about kind of how to adjust that as we go through each property. I always take something to make notes, even if it's like the notes thing on my phone, so I can update, oh, like this, didn't like that, so I can make adjustments. We want to make sure that we're spotting those signals, right? We kind of talked about nonverbal clues, and also verbal, like, are they talking about where to put their couch? Are they saying, oh, which room would you like, son? Right? All of those things, would be maybe like a indication that they are interested in that property. Lingering in the home longer than the other homes, right? Touching parts of the home, touching their chins and nodding. Those are all nonverbal clues. If they're starting to take notes and they hadn't before, not taking notes and they've been taking notes before might mean that they are in love with the property. Or if they start measuring rooms, windows, appliances, those type of things, starting to ask what would be included in the sale, what wouldn't, right? Some ways to kind of get those trial closing questions, right? Would your armoire fit? Maybe there's a piece of furniture that they had, like a dining room hutch or something. Would it fit in this property? Is this the room that you would put your son in, right? So kind of asking those trial closing questions to get an idea of their thought process. You could ask for like, you could straight out ask, is this the one? How do you feel about this home? Would you feel comfortable living here? Well, this looks like the home, am I right? Right? Where would you place your armoire, your sectional, your king size bed? Which bedroom would Johnny's or Susie's? Would you like to go somewhere, have a cup of coffee and talk about the homes that we've seen or talk about what this home would look like? Are you ready to make an offer would be an actual closing question. Shall we make an offer on this one? Should we pencil it up and see what it looks like on paper? That's a nice non-aggressive way of asking for the closing. Should we pencil it up and see what it looks like? Okay. Let's see here. If we've noticed we've seen several homes, we might want to, again, revise that criteria. We've kind of talked about that. Our goal is not to show every active property on the market. We want to keep it as few as possible. And so we may want to review the list of their must-haves. Okay. Let's see here. We are going to, okay, now we're going to dive into the rest of the buyer process. So now we've found the house, they've identified it, we've written the offer. Once we write that offer, there are a couple of different options. Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Let's see here. Maybe I didn't. Oh, I did. All right. Sorry, I meant to share a different screen. Once the buyer has made a decision, we're going to write that offer. Again, once we write an offer, there are a couple of options for our buyers' responses or our sellers' responses for that offer. They may just accept the offer, right? They could counter the offer. They could do a multiple counter offer, or they could reject it altogether. Okay. So just kind of know that's our options. We always want to make sure we write an offer that the buyer's not going to be sad that they missed out on the property if it doesn't get accepted. So I'm just looking for the right window to share here. All right, there we go. Oh, no. Sorry. Let's try this again. I apologize. All right. So offer accepted. Now we're in escrow. There we go. All right. I usually like to send out an introductory email to my buyers. It's on the screen. I'm going to hit the little share button. And I'm going to copy the link for you and put it in the chat box as well. Except my chat box is now gone. There we go. You will be added as a viewer to this. So if you want to make it your own, just save a copy of it to your Google Drive. But for the subject on this one, I usually say next steps in your home purchase. Once an offer gets accepted, number one, if I've got an agent that calls me and says, hey, I think we're going to accept your offer, or we're going to send you over a counter on just these few details. And I'm like, yeah, I think that'll be agreeable. I don't tell my buyer until I actually have that counter or that acceptance in hand, because I cannot tell you the number of times that an agent has called me and said, hey, we're accepting your offer. And then something happens and they end up not accepting our offer. And now I've told the buyers potentially like, hey, they're going to accept your offer. I'm just waiting for it to come through. Or, and then it never comes through. Now I've got to let the buyers know they got all excited and now they're sad. Okay. So I don't want to ever do that. So I usually wait until I have the accepted offer or the counter offer in hand before letting the buyers know. I may let the buyers know like, hey, I heard from the listing agent. It sounds like they're talking about your offer. It sounds positive, but I don't know yet. Right. Okay. And then once we're in contract, I'm going to send out this email that says next steps in your home purchase. I'm always going to let them know verbally and via text. I usually call them, and then I also let them know via text that their offer was accepted and they're officially in contract, then I send out this email that says, congrats. Over the next few days, this process is going to feel a little crazy. It's okay to feel a little overwhelmed with all the decisions you have to make and all the information you will be receiving. Please know that I am here for you. If you have questions, concerns, or just need help, let me know, right? I'm letting them know ahead of time. I'm setting the expectation for buyer's remorse, that they're going to feel overwhelmed. That's okay. It's normal. Don't get upset. You should receive an email from my transaction coordinator, Melina. She will be helping behind the scenes to make sure that we get everything we need during this transaction. She will also be setting up a website through HomeLight Listing Management where we will upload all of the property disclosures, reports, inspections, and any other important information for you to review. Any documents I need you to sign will come to you for electronic signatures from AuthentiSign and DocuSign. If you get anything to sign through a different program, please ask before opening, right? So I'm just setting those expectations. Not everybody uses HomeLight Listing Management. That's what I do. So if you're not going to use that, just take it out. Okay. Next steps, the deposit. Due by, and then I usually put the date that it's due. At the latest to title, I put the title company's name there and the title company's address. The total due is $3,000. You can make the deposit via personal check, cashier's check, or you can do a wire transfer. Let me know if you want those wire instructions. Please make sure the money comes from an account that your lender has record of, as they will need to verify the funds came from your account, right? Setting that expectation ahead of time. Please don't use your mattress money for that deposit because it won't count for the lender. Okay, I'm also letting them know when it needs to get taken the title, and there's lots of different ways they can get it there. Loan docs. Jojo, whoever the loan officer is, will be in touch with you. Jason will be in touch with you to make sure that you get the initial disclosures taken care of and get the appraisal ordered, right? So I'm letting them know that, hey, the lender is going to reach out to you as well. Insurance, contact your insurance agent to get a quote for homeowners insurance. Your lender will require this information. So once you have it, please forward it on to them. If you are unsure who to contact for this information, your auto insurance carrier is a good place to start, as you will sometimes get a multiple policy discount. If you need some recommendations, let me know. Hopefully you already gave them some insurance agents information when we sat down for the buyer consultation, because we talked about adding that for our buyer consultation. Inspections, if desired, need to be scheduled. Our inspection contingency is blank days, right? 10 days. We need to have all inspections completed before. So if my inspection contingency is 10 days, I'm going to say, hey, all inspections need to be completed in like 8 days. I'm going to shorten it up so that we have a couple days to review those reports, order additional inspections, right? Whatever that might be. There are several options for inspections and all are optional. Now, if this was a VA purchase, I would say there are several options for inspections. All are optional except the pest inspection. That is required by the VA for your loan, right? In California, that's what's required. Inspections that we recommend. There's always 5 inspections that I recommend. There are 2 optional ones depending on the property. So the pest, the whole home, the roof, the HVAC, and the sewer lateral. If there is a fireplace, I would recommend a chimney inspection. And if there is a pool, I would recommend a pool inspection. On here, I have kind of like, hey, here's what they do during that inspection. Here, what they're looking for. Here's the price range. Okay. There are lots of others too. I'm down here past those 7 inspections. Just delete the ones that don't apply. There are lots of others too. Let me know which ones you want scheduled and if you have any other concerns that wouldn't be covered by the above inspections, right? I'm leaving the door open for them to say, hey, yeah, we want the hillside inspected, or we'd like to have an arborist come out and look at the trees, right? Whatever it might be. You do not need to be at the inspections, although we do recommend it. The inspectors will be able to go over everything with you, answer any questions, and address any concerns. Please let me know if you plan to be there. Figure on it taking 2 to 2.5 hours. And please let me know your schedule from today through the end of next week so that I can schedule the inspections. You are welcome to select the inspectors yourself, or I have inspectors that I can recommend, right? Setting that up ahead of time that, hey, just because I've got ones that I would recommend doesn't mean that's who you have to go with. All inspections will need to be paid for at time of inspection or before. They all take payment with cash, check at the inspection, or you can pay with a card over the phone. Let me know if you need phone numbers. Congrats, you are well on your way to being a homeowner. Thanks again for allowing me to represent you in this process. I look forward to getting you the keys to your new home. I'm keeping the carrot in front of them, right? Reminding them of what the object is for the process. Any question of the intro email. All right, everybody's so quiet today. All right, so that's that intro email I send out once we're in contract. It helps me to get kind of the ball rolling, make sure they get everything that they need to get done. Now, I mentioned HomeLight Listing Management. You have access to this through Barry's. So if you log into Barry's, you can log into HomeLight Listing Management. For all of my buyer transactions, I create a listing property package. I know you're like, Amy, but it says buyers and listings. Yes, but I create a listing because then I have control over that package. So I go listings, create property package. I put in my buyers' names. I add them to the package. Let me find, here's, oh, these are all, I think all of my other ones were archived. Let's look. Here's one. Right, so this was buyer transaction. I put the property in there. It allows me to add, and then all the seller disclosures go in here, the preliminary title report, the NHD report, the CC&Rs, anything that comes through this property that the buyers might want a copy of or need to see or review, all goes in this file. Once you add documents to here, it'll pop up with a little button that says, would you like to notify viewers of changes to this file? And you say yes. And then it lets them know that documents have been added. I like this way better than emailing them because number one, you can see that they've accessed it and viewed it. And number two, things don't get missed or lost. Okay, because if we are emailing, now they're going back looking for things. At the end of the transaction, they can come in here and just download all of these documents straight to their computer. It's magic. So that's why I like this. I put everything in here that comes across through the property. Okay. So intro email, HomeLight Listing Management. Those are two of the systems I use for managing my buyers. And then I have this transaction action plan. And again, I'm going to copy link for this. I'm going to throw this in the chat box as well. So there's one for a listing and there's one for a purchase. Okay, so here I've got the buyer appointments. Here's, we've got finding and showing homes, all the steps and things that need to take place. And then we have, hey, once we've got the accepted offer, now what needs to happen? So we're going to make sure that we send that fully executed offer. That means with all the signatures to our TC or our transaction coordinator. Anything that's been signed up to this point goes to the transaction coordinator. Their BRBC, the SPBB, the RPA, the SBSA, the WFD8, right? All the things that have been signed go to the transaction coordinator. We're going to send this fully executed offer to title to open escrow. They just need the residential purchase agreement, any addendums, counter offers, or AEAs, which is an amendment to the existing agreement. That's what goes to the title. We're going to make sure we get those wire instructions for the deposit from escrow. We're going to send the fully executed offer to the lender. Again, they just need the residential purchase agreement, the AEA, and counters, and then any addendums if they're applicable. Okay, we want to avoid sending to the lenders anything that has to do with repairs or inspection reports. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, because the second we mention a report or an inspection, or we mention repairs, the lender's going to want to see reports and inspections, and it's going to red flag for them. So we don't want to send any of that over to the lender. We just want them to know the terms of the contract. We want to input the transaction into SkySlope. Your transaction coordinator should do that for you. Okay, hire a transaction coordinator. I do recommend understanding SkySlope, knowing the TC process, but you shouldn't be doing it more than one transaction or two. Melina is our in-house transaction coordinator, and she's fabulous. So if you have questions as to what a transaction coordinator does, schedule an appointment with her to sit down with her and have her go over what that process is as a TC so that you know what's in her lane and what gets taken off your plate. Day 0 still, got congratulations email to the buyers that I just went over. We're going to send out the BIE, which is the Buyer's Inspection Election Form, through Glide. My transaction coordinator usually does that. And that's just saying that, hey, what kind of inspections are you interested in? Doesn't mean we have to have them. It just says what they're interested in. And then we're going to send out a buyer email or intro email to the buyers with all the dates on it. Here's the date that we opened escrow. Here's when our contingencies are due. Here's the scheduled close of escrow. The sellers are staying in the property after the close of escrow. Here's where sellers are going to vacate. So we're going to make sure that they're aware of all the dates coming up so that we're all on the same page. An intro email is also going to go out to the listing agent and the title company, right? Introducing the transaction coordinator, introducing the SkySlope email address, making sure everybody's on the same page with the close of escrow date, and then any other important information such as rent back periods, a delay in escrow due to a seller contingency. Make sure that you request the seller disclosures, the NHD report, home warranty, HOA docs, right? So anything that you're going to need from this transaction should go out in that intro email to the title company and the listing agent. I like to, when I send out that email to the listing agent, I like it to say, hey, here's all the disclosures that I'm going to need from your sellers at a minimum. Okay. Get the home warranty confirmation or order if required. So if you've asked for a home warranty, get that ordered. Remember, we don't actually pay for it until the close of escrow, so we can order it on day 0 or day 1. We're going to start that HomeLight listing management file as the listing agent. That was that file that I showed you. We want to schedule inspections. So now we've moved into kind of day 1. So accepted offer, we get that back from the seller. That's day 0. The next day starts day 1. Okay, so just remember that the day we get the offer back is not day 1, that's day 0. Okay, so we want to schedule those inspections that the buyers wanted. We want to confirm the inspection dates and times with the seller's agent to make sure that everything works. We want to prepare for the appraisal if necessary. That would be compile the appraisal packet with property information and comps. As a buyer's agent, that doesn't often come into play, but if I know that the sale is contingent on that property appraising at the contract price, then you better believe that I'm going to meet the appraiser at the property and make sure they have all the details that justify the price that we offered. And that includes that if my buyer included a appraisal guarantee saying, hey, we offered 500,000, but as long, and we'll pay 10,000 over the appraised value if it comes in lower than that number. I'm going to work to save my buyers money and try to get that value to come in at the offer price. So that's when I would do the appraisal packet. Day 1, you want to complete that agent visual inspection disclosure. I would recommend using Glide for that process. Play around with it a little bit if you haven't already. But we want to do that agent visual inspection disclosure as close to the accepted offer as possible. And we also really, truly want to do it before the inspections happen, because once the inspections happen, the inspectors are going to make us more aware of several other material facts about the property that we might have not otherwise been aware of or even need to know for that visual inspection. So that visual inspection is to note anything visually that we see or hear with the property that might be considered a material issue. It's also our proof of the condition of the property at time of accepted offer. That's why I say do it as close to that accepted offer as possible, because the sellers are to leave the property in the same condition as on the date of the accepted offer when they vacate the property. But generally speaking, there's no record of what that was. So it's just like a he said, she said game unless we get that Avid done. I usually take pictures with my Avid using Glide. So then I have a record of the condition of the property upon accepted offer. Okay. You want to make sure to send status updates weekly once in contract to your buyers, to the other agent, whoever. So day 7, day 21, day 28, they're getting an update of here's what happened this week. Here's what you can look forward to next week. Okay, again, we want to request those seller disclosures. Again, we may want to include this either with the intro email or when we confirm with them the dates and times of the inspections. Once we get those disclosures, we want to review them for completeness. You're like, Amy, we're only on day 3. I know there's so much that happens day 0 and day 1. Remember that email that we sent out to our buyers that was like, you're going to feel a little overwhelmed. Well, you as a new agent, you're also going to feel a little overwhelmed. It's going to be okay. You've got a mentor to help guide you through this process, but there's just a lot of little steps. That's why we have this transaction action plan. We want to make sure we review those disclosures for completeness. Every question should have an answer. Anything marked yes should have an explanation. The date should be on it. The signatures should be on it from the sellers. It should be complete. If not, kick it back to the listing agent and ask them to finalize and get it complete. I'm going to upload all those disclosures to HomeLight Listing Management. We're going to receive from the title company a copy of the preliminary title report and the CC&Rs. That preliminary title report is going to go over what liens are currently on the property. It's going to ensure that all those are going to get paid off prior to the close of escrow. It's also going to talk about what easements or access might be granted to other parties with regards to that property. Usually on a prelim, you're going to see that the utility company has a easement for access of the meter to read the meter and maintain the lines. Usually the city has some sort of easement on there for the same thing. And you might see, so there might be weird things that pop up, like somebody else has easements for the, I don't know, to walk through the backyard. I have no idea, but you might see something weird on there. If it's a country property that maybe has a shared driveway, then there might be an easement across somebody else's property to access the property, right? We want to make sure that one's on there, or there's nothing unexpected. The title company can always help you decipher what is being said on that prelim. We're going to upload those prelims and CC&Rs to the HomeLight Listing Management file. We're going to receive and review the natural hazard zone disclosure report. I'm just looking that something doesn't spring up on there that I didn't anticipate. Okay, and just so you know, when you look at that NHD report, almost every single one of them says the map is not yet released by the state for the earthquake hazard zone. Okay, it's in California, it's in an earthquake hazard zone. We're going to upload that NHD report, that natural hazard zone disclosure report, to the HomeLight Listing Management file. I'm also going to upload all the pamphlets to the HomeLight Listing Management file, and those are there on your page 1 of the NHD report. There's usually hyperlinks, consumer pamphlets, which are like the dangers of lead-based paint and protecting your home from an earthquake and all those other things. I'm going to download those separately, and I'm going to upload them to my HomeLight Listing Management file separately to make sure that my buyer has a chance to review them. I'm not going to trust that they're going to see those hyperlinks. Same thing with the CC&Rs, our covenants, conditions, and restrictions that are on almost every home that's in a subdivision specifically are recorded on the title. So it's a hyperlink in the title report, that preliminary title report. I'm going to click on that hyperlink, download them separately, and upload them separately to make sure that the buyers have an opportunity to review those. If it's in a homeowners association, we're going to receive the HOA docs and upload those to the HomeLight Listing Management file. About day 3 or 4, we're going to confirm with the lender that the appraisal has been ordered. If you want to be the contact for that appraisal, generally speaking, the listing agent becomes the contact for that appraisal. But if you're planning to meet that appraiser at the property to deliver the appraisal packet, to make sure that you get the value for the offer that was made on that property, you may want to let the lender know up front at the very beginning that you want to be the contact for the appraisal for that property. Okay, that way you can do it on a day and time that works for you. About day 5, we're going to confirm that all parties have logged into HomeLight Listing Management file so that you know they're looking at stuff. We're going to prepare the BIE, which is the buyer inspection election, and the buyer inspection waiver for signatures. So the buyer inspection waiver has 2 main inspections on there, the home inspection and the pest. If they choose not to have one of those, because we always recommend them, then they're going to initial. Then it has a place for the following other inspections were recommended. And they can initial if they chose not to do those. Remember, we always recommend the minimum, those 5, the home, the pest, the roof, the HVAC, and the sewer lateral. Okay, and then the others are going to be determined on the house itself. So those would show up on that buyer inspection waiver. It also talks about further inspection was recommended and buyers chose not to have that on there. So there's lots of options on that BIW form, the buyer inspection waiver. We're going to send out all disclosures to buyers before signatures. I try to do this at least 5 days before the contingency removal is due for the review of seller disclosures. If there is a repair request, we're going to prepare that repair request. The goal here is to have that done at 3 days before the investigation contingency is due. We're going to check in with the lender on the appraisal contingency and appraisal completion. Try to do this 5 days prior to the appraisal contingency being due. We're going to complete that commission demand request 5 days prior to the close of escrow. We're going to remove that investigation contingency on the investigation contingency date, not before. Please don't do it before. It's unnecessary and just don't do it. In fact, I rarely remove the investigation contingency on the date that it's due. So remember, in the state of California, all those contingencies have to be removed in writing. They don't just automatically get removed because the date comes and goes. Okay. That being said, as a buyer's agent, I'm going to let that contingency float out there as long as possible until I get badgered by the listing agent or they send me a notice to perform. Oftentimes that results in me not removing contingencies until the date of the close of escrow, but sometimes it's the day of the contingency. Sometimes it's a week later. So I'm just going to wait until they badger me just a little bit, because the longer I have that contingency, any contingencies in place, if my buyer has an issue or something comes up, I'm still protected by not removing that contingency. Now, that being said, I usually have my buyers sign it by the due date, and then I sit on it and I don't send it over to the listing agent. That way my buyers think they've committed to the property. They've signed the removal form, but I'm going to sit on it until I get badgered for it so I can send it over. But that way, if something came up and the buyer was like, oh my gosh, I lost my job, I can't purchase this home anymore. I know I've removed all my contingencies. What are my options? And I'd be like, oh, well, just because you signed the contingency removal, I didn't actually send it over yet. So we can absolutely still cancel, right? So I just like to keep that door open as long as possible. Once the buyer signs all the disclosures, we're gonna get them back. We're gonna review those for completeness to make sure we didn't miss any signatures, any dates, anything like that. Keep in mind your transaction coordinator is going to be in charge of that if you've hired a transaction coordinator. We're going to make sure to send those signed disclosures back to the listing agent. Keep in mind that's going to be due on the same date as the review of seller disclosures contingency. Okay, the return of the disclosures is part of that contingency. We're going to negotiate any repair requests or price reductions. There's several options when it comes to repairs. Number one, I've set my buyers up for success during our buyer presentation to let them know that we're going to only ask for things that are deal breakers as repairs. Okay, so we're not going to ask for the nitpicky thing. There's an outlet cover missing. There's a chipped paint on the corner. Like, we're not asking for those things. We're asking for the HVAC system doesn't work. Okay, and there's options. So we can ask the seller to repair the items of concern. We can ask the seller to give us a credit towards the buyer's closing costs for those items of concern, or we can reduce the price of the property for those buyer concerns. Those are kind of our three options when negotiating repairs. For the most part, if your buyer has financed the transaction, you either want a credit towards closing costs or the repairs to actually be completed. Reducing the purchase price doesn't make that much of a difference to them. We're talking like a lot of buyers are only putting 3.5% down with an FHA deal. Getting the price reduced by $10,000 isn't going to change very much money out of pocket, and they're still not going to have the money to do those repairs after the close of escrow. Now, that being said, let's say there was a major repair that needed done, like the entire roof, and we didn't want to slow the close of escrow to replace the roof, and the buyer wants a credit. Let's say it's going to be $20,000 for the roof. The buyer can only get a credit from the seller for the amount of their actual closing costs. It cannot exceed that or the overage. So if their actual closing costs are $13,000 and we want a $20,000 credit, they're only going to be able to utilize $13,000 of that credit. The additional $7,000 is going to go back to the seller at the close of escrow. Wah, wah, wah. So we want to make sure that we confirm the amount of credit the buyer can receive with the buyer's lender before we negotiate it. So in a situation like that, we may say there's a couple of options. I'm going to like really confuse you now. The option is if we don't want to delay the close of escrow to get the roof replaced, we can either ask for a credit for the $13,000 that would cover the buyer's closing costs, and then a reduction of price of $7,000 for the additional $7,000 for the $20,000 roof. Now, again, the buyer's really not going to notice that $7,000, so they're still going to have the roof replaced and not have those funds available. The other option is we delay the close of escrow and get the roof replaced. Or the third option on something like that is oftentimes if there's a full repair being done, we can set up the lender, we have to run it by the lender and make sure they're going to be okay with this, but we can actually do what's called an escrow holdback, where we hold those funds in escrow the roof gets replaced, and then the title company actually pays the roofer directly from the funds that were held in escrow after the close of escrow. And then you have to provide proof that the roof was replaced to the lender within a certain time period. Usually it's within like 60 days. Okay, so those are kind of your options that you have when negotiating repairs. Now, for most repairs, that escrow holdback isn't going to work, because usually we're like nitpicking repairs out of the home inspection report. And if we say, hey, we want these things done, we're going to do an escrow holdback, then the lender is going to say, well, we want to see a copy of the report. Now you have to send them the entire home inspection report, and they're going to start nitpicking additional items that need to be repaired prior to the close of escrow, or that we need an escrow holdback for. So it only works for things like the roof, where we've got a separate roof inspection, the HVAC system, where we've got a separate HVAC report, and we're doing all the repairs that have been mentioned in that report, or replacing the whole system. Same thing with like a septic or a well. So those are all separate reports. So sometimes it works for those items as well for an escrow holdback. Okay. Once we've got the appraisal in and the lender has confirmed that it came in at value and that it has no conditions as part of the appraisal. So sometimes a appraisal will come in with a subject to. So it's appraised at the purchase price, but it's subject to the following repairs. It's got chipped and peeling paint, and the house was built before 1978, so it might be lead-based paint. So we need that scraped and repainted, right? So the smoke detectors weren't installed, whatever that might be. We want to make sure that that appraisal came in at value and doesn't have any conditions on it. If it does have conditions, those are a contingency of the appraisal, not the inspections. And we would ask for those. Those would be called the lender required repairs that you see on that repair request. So we may submit a secondary repair request for those lender required repairs on the appraisal. If the appraisal, Anastasia, do you have a question?
Oh,
No, she just unmuted herself. She didn't even say no. All right. If the appraisal does come in with contingencies, we use the repair request to ask for those. If the appraisal does not come in at value, then we have options there as well. If there was an appraisal guarantee in place, then we've already covered what the difference is that we're willing to pay. We would submit an AEA for the difference in the contract price versus the appraised value with that appraisal gap. And if we wanted to renegotiate the purchase price based on that appraisal, we would use the AEA form as well. So even if there wasn't an agreement already in place, we can try to negotiate down the contract price based on that appraised value. And the reason that we want to do that is because I know there's so much information in this lesson. The reason that we want to do that is our lender is going to loan money either based on the contract price or the appraised value, whichever's less. Okay, so if our contract price is $550,000 and our buyers were going to put 10% down, they're going to put down $55,000 for $550,000 purchase, right? Their down payment's going to be based on that contract price. Now, if the appraisal only came in at $500,000, now the lender is going to say, hey, we're only going to loan based on $450,000. Okay. So to get to that contract price, now the buyer's going to have to come in with additional funds to cover that gap between the appraised value and the contract price if we can't renegotiate the contract price. So that's why that becomes important, is it's going to increase the amount of money that the buyer is going to have to come in with, because the lender is going to base their loan based on that lower appraised value versus the contract price. So that's why it's important to negotiate that. Once we've come to an agreement on everything, then we can remove that appraisal contingency. I think that covers everything there. We want to make sure we schedule any repairs as necessary. We're about day 15 here. Day 17, request disclosures back from the listing agent. So there was disclosures and things that the buyer signed that the seller didn't already send us over, like our agent visual inspection disclosure, maybe the buyer's inspection waiver, right? Whatever it might be, inspection election, that the seller needs to sign. So we're going to make sure that the seller signs those after we send them over and that we get those back, right? There's a lot of back and forth going on. We're going to check in with the lender on the loan and the CD status 5 days prior to the loan contingency to make sure we're on track and good to remove that loan contingency when it comes due. We're going to confirm the loan status with the lender at least 1 day before the loan contingency. Keep in mind that lenders are going to be really hesitant to say, yes, go ahead and remove the loan contingency. They're going to say more things like, oh yeah, we took it through underwriting. We only have like 2 conditions left. Okay, thank you, lender. That doesn't help me at all. So those conditions, lender, what are they? Do you anticipate having any issues getting those met? Because we're due to remove our loan contingency. I just want to make sure that we're feeling really solid before I do so, right? So we want to have those conversations with the lender. Once it's loan contingency time frame, we're going to remove that loan contingency. Again, on any of the contingencies, we are going to sit on those contingencies until I get badgered by the listing agent for those once the due date has passed. And I would never, ever send those contingencies over prior to the due date. Now, the only exception to that is on the new repair request that came out. Part of that repair request is removing the investigation contingency. It's defaulted into that, hey, if we're asking for these repairs and the seller agrees to it, the buyer is agreeing to remove the investigation contingency. Okay, so we don't need a separate one for that. Just keep that in mind with that repair request. If the sellers agree to it as requested, the buyer's removing their investigation contingency. All right. Once we've removed all the contingencies, then the listing agent should move the property from contingent to pending. So when you see a contingent property in the MLS, it starts as active. Once it's under contract, it goes to contingent. A lot of people interpret contingent as it's contingent on the sale of another property. That's the only contingency. No, any of the 8 contingencies or 9 contingencies that are in our residential purchase agreement would trigger it going from active to contingent instead of pending. Once we've removed all of those contingencies, then the listing agent should move it over to pending from contingent. And you'll need to upload a copy of that pending report to SkySlope. Again, your transaction coordinator will do that for you. If you've hired one, we're going to make sure to upload all signed docs to SkySlope. We're going to request any missing documents from the listing agent. This is about day 21, assuming it's like a 30-day close of escrow. Otherwise, these are all going to adjust just a little bit. We're going to confirm the commission demand that we get from our office, and we're going to make sure title has a copy of that. We're going to sign the commission demand and upload it into SkySlope. So any agents on that commission demand must sign the demand to make sure it's accurate. We're going to confirm with the lender the CD issue date. That's the closing disclosure. And what happens is 7 days prior to close of escrow, we want to make sure that CD has gone out. Once the closing disclosure has gone out, what happens is the buyers acknowledge the receipt of the closing disclosure. Then they sit and they twiddle their thumbs for 3 days. We can't do anything as far as closing of that property goes for 3 days. So that's why it's important to make sure like 7 days prior to close of escrow that CD has been issued, or that we are going to issue it in the next like 24 to 48 hours. Ideally 7 days before, because if the CD gets issued 7 days, now we're waiting 3 days. So now we're 3 or 4 days before the close of escrow. That sets us up to sign, to fund, and record. Okay, 7 days prior to close of escrow, we're going to prepare for signing. This is usually when I communicate with my buyers to determine their signing, where they want to sign, whether it's at the title company, their home, their work, what their schedule looks like, so that we can kind of coordinate that with the title company. We're going to schedule that buyer signing. Usually what I do is I confirm with the buyer the information, then I shoot an email over to title and say, hey, my buyers would like to sign at their current address, which is X. They're available any evening after 5 o'clock. Please arrange. And here's the buyer's contact information. Please let me know once it's been scheduled. Okay, I usually just kick that over to them. And if you've got a buyer feedback form, I'm going to send that over to the title company prior to the close of escrow, so it can be included with the closing package, so they can fill out that buyer feedback form at time that they fill out the final documents. We're going to schedule that final walkthrough. The default on your residential purchase agreement is 5 days prior to the close of escrow, not 1 to 5 days, not 3 days. It's actually the 5th day prior to close of escrow. It's contractually when you're supposed to do that. The goal here is to verify that any repairs have been completed and that the home is in the same condition as when the offer was accepted. On my residential purchase agreement, I usually write it in as 1 to 5 days so that I can complete it anytime during those last 5 days of the contract prior to the close of escrow. You want to review the HUD or the estimated settlement statement to make sure it's accurate. If they're getting a credit from the seller, that should be on there. The home warranty should be on there, right? We just want to make sure all the things are on there, that it's accurate, and that the buyers know what the anticipated cash to close is. Okay, that's our next step, is we're going to talk with the buyers about the final funds to close. Hey, buyers, I show here that you need to come into escrow in order to close with $13,000. That's your down payment and your closing costs minus what was already put into escrow for the deposit. Does that number sound accurate to you? Yep, that's what we were expecting. Perfect. It says it's like $11,236.52. So if you could just bring in, $11,500, you'll get the excess back at the close of escrow. I just want to make sure that if anything pops up last minute, that it's all taken care of and that we're not short. Perfect. That makes sense. You're going to need to wire those funds. I'll get you over wire instructions again, or I'll have title contact you with the wire instructions so that you can do that prior to signing the final documents, right? We don't want to wait until the last day to get those funds in to close. I usually am available during the buyer signing. I'm not at the buyer signing, so I usually let them know that, hey, I'm not going to be there when you sign your final paperwork. But if you need anything, I've got my phone. I'm watching for you. I know when your signing is. Feel free to call if you have any questions. Okay. Then you're going to complete that final walkthrough and the verification of property condition. I usually do it the day prior to the close of escrow. In fact, oftentimes what happens is we do the signing and then we go do the verification of property condition. One day prior to close of escrow, they're happy, they're excited about getting keys. We're going to ask for who else do they know that needs my same level of service in either purchasing or selling a home. Ask for those referrals. Remember, you don't get what you don't ask for. You're going to review the file for completeness in SkySlope to make sure all the documents are in there, everything's signed, that nothing was kicked back, that you're ready to close escrow. Okay. And ultimately, that once you close escrow, you're going to get your check issued because that file's got to be complete. About one day prior to close of escrow, we're going to schedule key delivery and closing photos. So I'm going to check in with the listing agent, say, hey, it looks like we're on track to close tomorrow. Are all the keys at the property, or do I need to pick some up from another location? Right? Perfect. I think, we usually get recording confirmation by 10 a.m. So I've got an appointment to deliver keys at 1 pending the recording of the property. Once you've closed escrow, title should send you a copy of the FIRPTA, or the seller's affidavit of non-foreign status. We're going to get that officially closed phone call and text messages to the buyers to let them know if they're officially homeowners. I've got this on here twice. I've got the officially closed phone call and text, and then phone call. Send the move to closed email to the listing agent. I like to say, hey, thank you so much for a great transaction. Please let me know when you move the property to sold. And remember, because I've got a co-agent that worked with me, to make sure that you put both of our information in there as the closing agents. Here's our Barry's information, our Barry's ID. So it makes it really easy for them to pull up that information and add us. Send the thank you email to title, lender, listing agents. This is all close of escrow day. Review reviews from buyers, or request reviews from buyers. We got that feedback form back. We know that they're happy. We've asked them for referrals. Now we're going to request reviews from buyers on places like Zillow and Realtor and Yelp and Google, right? Make sure your SkySlope file is complete. You can claim that closed sale in Zillow. So if you create a Zillow profile, you can log into your agent hub on Zillow and actually claim the buyer transaction once it's been moved to sold in Zillow. So it'll show up under your recent sold properties. You're going to move it to closed in your CRM. You're going to set up the sold touch campaign. So now they're going to stay on that 36 plus interaction campaign, where they're going to get phone calls once a quarter. They're going to get emails twice a month, right? They're going to get 36 plus interactions, as well as I like to interact with them more frequently right after the close of escrow. It's going to alert me when I should call to check in with them, when I should resend over their home warranty information to make sure they have that, when I should drop off their closing gift at 2 to 3 to 4 weeks out, right? So that I'm interacting with them almost on a weekly basis for that first month or two after the close of escrow. Send out that thank you card to the seller's agent, title company, lender, inspectors, anybody who is part of that transaction, to build that rapport and that relationship. Send a thank you card to your buyers. And then once it's closed, we're going to send out just sold cards to everybody around there. to just let them know that we represented the buyer and got them an amazing deal, or that you had a hand in closing that property, trying to secure potential other buyers or sellers. We're going to download and send that HomeLight listing management file to the buyers, or remind them to download the documents. Once that's done, you're going to archive that file. Even once it's archived, you're still able to pull it back up, but archiving just allows you to not show up in your active properties, so it keeps it cleaner. You're going to move zip forms over to close. So again, it doesn't show up in your active transactions. Update their address in your CRM, right? Important part there. Post on social media and tag the buyers. Share their story, right? Send home warranty information to buyers 7 days post close of escrow. So this is part of our Just Sold Touch campaign, is that it's going to alert us to do all of these things after the close of escrow for our buyers. Follow up on reviews. Call and touch base to see how everything's going. We're going to deliver the closing gift. And then we're going to return them to that 36 plus interaction campaign after delivery of closing gifts. So here is kind of what that would look like for a 36 plus interaction campaign. Any questions about the flow of a buyer transaction? I know there was a lot of information. We've gone over just a little bit, but I'm feeling pretty good that we only went over 6 minutes. All right. Hopefully you've gotten the tools that you need. The link for the buyer intro email and the transaction action plan is in the chat box. So you can save those to your Google Drive. And then again, I use HomeLight Listing Management and Glide as my 2 additional tools for filling out forms, as well as keeping the file easily managed for buyer access. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you so much for joining me today. You can join us on next Wednesday at 11 a.m. for part 3 of our business planning session. The other one will be posted soon so that you can watch week 2. Week 1 is already posted. You can find it in the Foxhole along with the worksheets for both weeks 1 and weeks 2. We'll pick up on week 3 next week. And then I don't know what our training is next Thursday at 10 a.m. But I think we're moving on to the seller transactions. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's seller transactions. So thanks for joining me today. We will see you next week. Have a great week.